Hello Crown Corner fans, it's your host Crown, ready to bring you another batch of fascinating, sometimes outrageous stories from everyday life. You never know what's around the corner, and these tales prove just that. From the unexpected to the unbelievable, we've got it all covered. So settle in, relax, and let's embark on this storytelling journey together. Remember, if you enjoy these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Now, let's get into it. For context, I've been working at a resort restaurant for almost 4 years that also operates as a private club for members. As you probably expect, most if not all of our members are very rich people who usually either own or manage some major successful business or inherited money from a family member. Despite their privilege, however, it hasn't stopped these people from being kind and respectful towards the staff and guests. They are honestly really sweet people most of the time and only ever act entitled when they feel they haven't been given the basic treatment expected for any guest at our hotel. Even the owner himself, who visits every so often, doesn't ask for anything outrageous if he knows he can get it from us. That doesn't mean entitled types aren't uncommon, but even still, their behavior doesn't last long. They can demand the manager all they want, but the manager can still say no and get away with it. This is because no matter how much they scream or cry, throw their money or titles around, or act like a jerk, our resort still puts the happiness of their staff over money. As a HR rep at my recent annual training said, no matter how important our members are or how much money they spend, that doesn't give them the right to treat others badly or act like they are better than those around them. We have no tolerance for that. So pull up a chair and get your popcorn because I'm about to tell you the three-part story about how a family of three, a daughter, a mother, and a father, had their memberships completely revoked and their faces plastered on "Don't serve" signs because they decided to throw a fit and threaten staff, managers, and eventually one of the big bosses himself. Let's begin. Side note, this story took place in a different restaurant, a sports bar. It was told to me by a bartender who had connections there. I know the important details and not any fluff, so keep that in mind. This story started when a new girl, Heather, was hired to work as a waitress at a sports bar. Heather had known about the job through her parents, Mrs. Karen and Mr. Kevin, who were both members at our resort. Hiring children of members actually isn't uncommon since whenever the parents needed their child to get a job, they would automatically consider the resort due to their connections. However, you don't get any extra perks for being both a member and an employee here. One night, when Heather was working, the bar got hit really hard and it was an all-hands-on-deck kind of situation. So imagine the surprise when a frantic waitress ran across the table when Mrs. Karen, Mr. Kevin, and Heather were all sitting. Heather was happily laughing with her parents, eating food, drinking a cocktail. A massive no-no, by the way, for a multitude of reasons. And generally, just slacking off. The employee walks up and says to Heather, "Hey, what are you doing? You're supposed to be working. I need your help." Heather brushes the employee off and says, "I can't. I'm spending time with my parents right now." The employee responds, "You can't do this. We're in the middle of a shift. Please help me." Heather repeats her refusal. "Leave me alone. I'll work when my parents are gone." Her parents didn't say much as far as I can remember. So the employee, red-faced, did what any other person would do in the situation and told one of the managers, who was furious. When the manager approached the table, she was even angrier. Maybe it was a cocktail her employee was holding or the fact that Heather had misbehaved before. But the manager fired Heather that night and sent her home. I can't remember whether the parents were there or not at that moment, but I recall being told that once or twice they called to complain about how it was unfair their child was fired because insert reason here. However, it wouldn't be the last time they intervened. About a week has passed since Heather was fired, and it's just a normal day for the sports bar. As typical, the employees just started arriving for work and started preparing the bar at a restaurant area for the guests who'd be arriving in an hour. Among those employees was the manager for that day, who I will call Alice. Alice was actually one of the main managers of the sports bar and was very good at her job. I'd worked with her once before and she's one of the kindest and most loving ladies you'd ever have the pleasure of working with. She was helping the employees with their duties when the doors to the bar opened unexpectedly. Guests coming into the bar before opening wasn't uncommon, But this wasn't any normal person. It was a very, very angry Mrs. Karen who immediately upon entering the bar started screaming at the staff. "My daughter has COVID and now she's sick. I bet she got it from one of you, didn't she? I can't believe you monsters would do that to her. You got her fired and then you get her sick? Don't you know who I am?" For the record, this happened in mid to late 2020 when COVID-19 was still a big issue. Masks were mandatory for businesses and vaccines weren't even available to the public yet. The staff immediately stopped what they were doing and started watching. Keep in mind, this sports bar was actually one big massive room, so everyone there could see and hear everything. Alice tried to approach Mrs. Karen and asked her to calm down and leave because they weren't open yet. However, Mrs. Karen kept asking and making a major scene out of everything. Alice shifted to a more strict tone, insisting Mrs. Karen leave or she'd get security involved. And that's when Mrs. Karen noticed something behind Alice. One of the employees had gotten their phone out and started recording everything that was happening. I mean, obviously someone would do that in this day and age, right? Mrs. Karen was furious and turned her anger onto the employee. She ran up to them and smacked their phone so hard it flew out of their hands and then proceeded to scream at them even louder than before. "Oh, that would be assault, ma'am." Alice immediately called security, who came to the bar almost immediately. Mrs. Karen had to be physically dragged out of the building by two very large security guards as she screamed every possible thing an entitled person could say. As you'd expect from a situation like this, an incident report had to be filed, and since Mrs. Karen was a member of the resort, her and Mr. Kevin's membership was temporarily suspended pending investigation. Security even had to print posters with Mrs. Karen's face on it, saying to keep watch and under no circumstances serve her or even her husband until further notice. And then it got worse. The time frame between Mrs. Karen's freakout and this wasn't ever told to me, but I remember it happened so soon after that the original posters with Mrs. Karen on them hadn't even been taken down yet. Needless to say, Mr. Kevin, who was the primary holder of the family's membership, was furious about what happened. But what do you think he'd do? Did he try to reach out calmly and apologize? Did he wait a little for the dust to settle before repairing things? Most employees actually know where most of the major managers' offices are and know how to find them. While this was never taught to me when I was first trained, I believe it's probably just a cautionary thing. One of the major managers, our resort general director, had his office located in the main building and, as you guess, has power over various departments. As you'd expect, his name is everywhere, including major emails, the members, who gets about newsletters, and things like that. Everyone knew this man, knew his face, knew his position, and knew what he did. On that day, Mr. Kevin arrived at the resort and immediately started asking employees where he could find the GD, the General Director. Some naive fool who probably had no idea of anything going on gave him the answer and told him where he could find him. Honestly, I have no idea why this employee gave the answer so willingly, and maybe I'll never know, but Mr. Kevin charged the office. The General Director was quietly sitting at his desk in his office when Mr. Kevin threw open the doors and, without hesitating, unloaded all his fury upon the man. The General Director, a man who had never seen angry or raise his voice, immediately told Mr. Kevin that he shouldn't be yelling at him and that he will get security involved. But say it with me, Mr. Kevin didn't stop. He instead kept insisting his membership be reinstated, that his wife be let back onto the resort, that this was all ridiculous, and that he spent thousands on us, and that we should apologize. After all, it wasn't his fault. But Mr. General Director wasn't amused. Of course, he was aware of the situation with Mr. Kevin's family and membership status, but his hands were tied and what Mr. Kevin was doing at that moment wasn't exactly going to help him. I mean, would you help a man who just barged into your office unannounced and started screaming at you almost immediately? Just like his wife, security was called and Mr. Kevin was dragged out of the office and thrown off property. I even think the police got involved, but I can't remember for sure. What I do remember is this being the final straw for Mr. Kevin and his family, and courtesy of Mr. General Director, Mr. Kevin's entire family not only had their membership terminated, but were even banned from the property. Well, what would you expect to happen? Play with fire, prepare to get burned, right? I remember first learning about this story when I saw the posters for myself. Imagine a piece of paper with a family picture of Mr. Kevin and Mrs. Karen hung on a wall of security's office with these fine words written. Mr. Kevin and Mrs. Karen's membership has been suspended and terminated due to their poor treatment of staff and guests on our property. If you see these two anywhere on property or at sports bar, do not serve them and immediately call security. Thank you. The poster stayed on that wall for almost 2 months. I'd often talk to some of the officers at security. I would visit them a lot before I started work for the day during the summer, and they never saw or heard from them again. As my co-worker finished the story, she laughed loudly and said, "Those nutcases had it coming. Good riddance." As far as I know, none of them were ever heard from again. I agree. Don't be an entitled jerk. Hey K-Korner friends, enjoying the show? Click that like button to show some love and drop a comment to share your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe to join our amazing community for more awesome stories. Alright, let's dive back into our next tale. Hey there, I'm just your average Target employee. My days are usually filled with a regular hustle and bustle of retail life. But there was one incident that truly stood out. The day Karen and Kevin clashed over a Starbucks Stanley tumbler. It was a bright Wednesday morning, and our store had just received the much-anticipated shipment of the new Starbucks Stanley tumblers. These tumblers were the latest trend, and everyone seemed desperate to get their hands on one. I was assigned to assist with a special display, and that's where I first encountered Karen. Karen, with her stern expression and demanding aura, approached me right away. "Where are your Starbucks tumblers? I need one now," she exclaimed, her voice piercing through the morning calm. I politely directed her to the aisle where the tumblers were displayed, and she hurried off. I thought that was the end of it, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Minutes later, as I was restocking some shelves near the checkout counters, I heard a commotion. I turned around to see Karen in a heated argument with Kevin, another customer who was notorious for his short temper. "You can't just take the last tumbler. I was here first," Karen yelled, her face red with anger. "I don't care. I got it, and it's mine," Kevin retorted, clutching the tumbler tightly. The argument escalated quickly, and before I knew it, they were pushing and shoving each other. The other customers began to gather around, some trying to intervene, others just watching the drama unfold. As I rushed over to break up the fight, Karen pushed Kevin with such force that he stumbled backward, knocking into a nearby elderly lady. The lady lost her balance and fell to the ground with a thud, causing a collective gasp among the onlookers. "Stop, this is enough," I shouted, trying to get between Karen and Kevin, but they were too caught up in their tussle to listen. Suddenly, security arrived and they managed to pull Karen and Kevin apart. The elderly lady was helped to her feet by a few concerned customers, and thankfully she seemed to be okay, just a bit shaken. The police were called and Karen and Kevin were both handcuffed and escorted out of the store. As they were led away, Karen was still yelling about how unfair everything was, while Kevin was just glaring at everyone. The elderly lady was checked by the paramedics and thankfully had no serious injuries. The store manager apologized to her and offered her a gift card as a gesture of goodwill. As for the infamous tumbler, it ended up being placed back on a shelf, a silent witness to the chaos it had inadvertently caused. I work at a nightclub part-time as floor staff. My job is to collect empty cups and generally clear up after all the messy drunk people. This particular night, my mood was slowly going down, mostly because I had to clean up vomit 3 times before the incident, 6 times total by the end of the night. I am walking through the dance floor with a half-full basket of cups, doing my usual route for the 100th time when I feel a tug on my hair. My hair is about shoulder length, not too long but quite long for a guy. I whip around and see a guy laughing. I instantly say, "Don't," as sternly as I can. He just goes, "Ooh," like a child who is in trouble but doesn't care and just continues laughing. I instantly turned around and grabbed security. Luckily, there was one posted just a few feet away from where this happened. I point to the guy and say, "Him, kick him out." The bouncer then starts escorting him through the dance floor and out into the alleyway. The alleyway leads to the entrance/exit. I start to go back to my job, but I just can't. I drop off the basket and head to the staff smoking area to try to calm down. I take deep breaths and then sit down for a minute with my head in my hands. After a couple of minutes, I think I've calmed down enough to go back. On my way back, I see the guy with his friend talking to the bouncer that escorted him off the dance floor and pass them on my way to grab something opposite their direction. I then turn into my manager, who then asks me what happened with the guy outside. I tell him just kick the guy out. He says he wants to know what happened first. I tell him a quick version of what happened in a rather pissed off tone and start to go back to my job. At this point, I'm really pissed off again and having trouble getting back to a level of calm I work with. I have to pass the guy and he actually apologizes, saying he was just messing around, and reaches his hand out for me to shake it. I take a deep breath and a second to think. I think I should say, any other day I would let it go, but today I was already in a terrible mood. Until the bouncer to just kick him out and move on. But instead I shake his hand and say, it's alright, and go back to work. Still seizing, and now is the worst mood I've been in a long time. I caught up with a friend from my secondary school and told him what happened. He's sympathetic and tells me to go take more time to calm down. I still work, but I'm feeling a little better. Thinking because he apologized he's probably back on the dance floor barely learning his drunk lesson. While on my route I passed the bouncer that escorted him again and asked him how it went. He says after he got the guy to apologize they kicked him out. I had the biggest grin on my face, and later my manager notices. He says after I told him what happened he got the head bouncer and told him to kick him out. The head bouncer just told him, you don't touch the staff, and told him to leave. Then, because the guy that did it and his friend both got kicked out. I felt a little bad for the friend because he didn't do anything, but also he didn't do anything, you know? He could have stopped or at least chastised his friend for what he did, but he didn't say anything to him or me when it happened. He got banned, and my mood went from awful to satisfied really quick. Backstory: I'm 14 and I live with my mom and brother. My favorite color is blue and I happen to be in Walmart. I'm 5'7" and have a slightly deep voice and some facial hair. I was in Walmart 2 months ago before this pandemic with my mom. We're getting normal household things. My mom asked if I could go and get our milk and I said yes. The thing I was wearing happened to be similar to Walmart's work outfit. While I was getting the milk, the rude lady came up to me. She looked maybe around 70. Where is the yogurt? I turned around. Huh? Where is the yogurt? Sorry, I don't work here. I don't know where the yogurt was and I was in a rush. What? Yes you do. You're dressed in the attire. I'm sorry ma'am, I honestly don't work here. I'm only 14 and this place only hires staff older than 16 I believe. In comes her husband, the rude man. What's going on honey? This employee points to me, won't point me to the yogurt. Sir, please help us to the yogurt. I don't work here. Oh my god, I don't care if you're on a break. Just get us a freaking yogurt. Then an actual employee walks by. What's going on here? He asks. This rude employee of yours won't help us find the yogurt. Ma'am, he doesn't work here. Her husband says, yes he does. He's wearing your attire. Sir, he honestly doesn't work here. Get me your manager. So the manager comes over. What seems to be the issue? I say I was trying to, but I get interrupted. I asked this employee to point me to the yogurt and he said I can kiss his A. I want him fired. I'm thinking to myself, did this lady just say what I think she just said? The manager says, ma'am, he doesn't work here. Yes, he does. He's wearing the outfit. The manager asks me, sir, look at me. How old are you? 14. He's just trying to go away from his duties. She says that. And my mother comes over. What's going on? The manager tells her, this lady thinks your 14-year-old son works here. The lady's face goes pale. Well, I just, I add, she even said that I swore at her. I didn't. My mom got mad and yelled at her. In the end, she got banned from harassing another customer and we got a huge discount. And that's a wrap for today's episode of K-Korner. I hope these stories have entertained you, maybe even made you think a bit. Life's a wild ride full of unexpected twists, and we're here to share those moments with you. Thank you for joining me today, and if you liked what you heard, please show your support with a like and a comment. Your feedback means the world to me. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories, and remember to keep it light, fun, and easygoing. Until next time, this is Crown, signing off.